Well, I didn't see that coming. I did not expect that turn of events. What Jos Verstappen just said has made the Red Bull situation all the more interesting. Yes, this video does talk about the potential future of one Sergio Perez, but it's not all doom and gloom and saying he should be sacked right away. This might actually work out for him, at least for a little bit longer. As well as Yuki, Liam, and Franco. Just so we're clear, as of this moment, Checo has a contract which is good through to the end of 2025 at minimum. In fact, if he's able to turn things around and do his best for Red Bull, then he could be there for 2026. However, given what Checo has to deal with for the rest of the season, having a bodge job on his floor and not getting brand new parts, there is very little he can do in terms of being able to match Max Verstappen's results with a car which is being held together by sellotape. Yes, I know it's not actually sellotape, but, that's just there for dramatic effect. And there are plenty of reasons why Perez's future looks precarious at the moment, what with his lack of points compared to his teammate, the amount of money spent on repairing his car, which couldn't be spent on developing the RB20 due to the cost cap, as well as the Constructors' title eluding them, save for a potential all-in strategy by giving Max the best of the best for their final update package ready for Vegas, and praying that he can get both titles for them. Now, that's a bit of a Hail Mary in my honest opinion. I really don't see Red Bull getting the Constructors' title back, but I can see them maybe securing the Drivers' Championship with 2 races to spare. Put simply, Ferrari and McLaren, they're simply too good. I simply can't see them falling off hard in the next few races or something. I mean, that being said, McLaren could maybe pull off some duff strategies and reliability might harm Ferrari, but right now, I don't see Red Bull turning things around, at least for the team. But given light of recent events and a backing down of a certain Dutchman's father, it makes me think that there might be a solution to Red Bull's driver lineup, as well as restoring harmony, as well as giving Sergio Perez the time to breathe, and maybe save his career in time for 2026 when he can choose to retire on his own terms. I shall break it down for you with my theory, as well as providing the news and information in terms of context. And if you like my theory, why don't you like this video? And maybe if you really like it, then you could perhaps subscribe for more of them. In any case, the impetus for this video comes from the joint revelations of the supposed amount of cash Red Bull might be willing to pay Williams for the services of Franco Colapinto, a reported $20 million, which is a lot more than the previously suggested $10 million that was floating around a couple of weeks ago. But I couldn't just base a video solely on that bit of information. There had to be something else to really give this theory some legs. And that came around with what Jos Verstappen said in regards to the prospects of one Liam Lawson, who currently is doing everything in his power to make Sergio Perez look bad. You always see Liam and Sergio scrapping, and you just think, why? This could compromise points for both teams if they're not careful. Say what you will about that, but one thing's for sure, Liam is definitely trying with all of his might, as well as trying Checo's patience. In previous videos, I'd suspected that Liam's path to Red Bull Racing would have been almost impervious due to the belief that the father of Max wouldn't want anyone who could challenge his son, and Horner wouldn't want the same thing, for fear of losing their star driver, which he has now recently rated as invaluable to the squad. Now, I know that a lot of you probably don't want to hear a word coming out of Jos Verstappen's mouth. I, for one, am not a fan of his parenting style whatsoever. Just allow me to present what Jos said, because it does give Liam Lawson some cause for optimism for his long-term future in Formula One, which he so desperately needs, as well as the whole country of New Zealand. I think Lawson is doing very well. It seems logical to me that he is ready to step up. Let him finish this season and build confidence, and then the team has to decide what they do for next year. I certainly don't oppose Liam. It's better if there is someone who is competitive and pushes Max forward a bit. That always helps, but we'll see. Now, well, maybe Christian and Jos are in agreement about something. And it's certainly bolstering the quote from Max himself a while ago, stating that he wasn't all that fussed who his teammate was so long as they didn't get in his way and cause him problems, at least in terms of hindering his own progress. And also, it does make you think that even though Sergio Perez is not really doing much in terms of supporting Max Verstappen's championship campaign, you have to look back to last year, when it looked likely we were going to be getting a championship showdown between the two drivers after the first 4 races. 2 wins apiece, and Max was really frustrated after what happened in Baku, so therefore he drove angry and was sort of motivated by Checo's good form and completely pummeled him into the dirt. And what better motivation in Brazil was to get one over the British media? Yeah, it just shows impetus is really important for Max. That's all well and good, but this quote of his does make the possibility of a plucky young teammate all the more likely in the fullness of time. And even though people are really wanting Franco Colapinto in that Red Bull, I personally think that's a little bit wishful thinking. So I think most likely it will be Liam in that car because he knows the Red Bull camp much more than Franco does. But it is right to speculate because presently, the Red Bull driver situation is the last mystery of this year's silly season. I'm not sure what to think of it, honestly. Because we all thought that the silly season would be the silliest season that ever sillied, because it started off so spectacularly with Lewis Hamilton signing to Ferrari before the season began, and then it sort of just fell down a little bit. We just got the same old maneuvers, people staying where they were, or people making moves that were to be expected. But then it really ticked up after Oliver Behrman's performance in Jeddah, and it made F1 realise that you know what? We'll take a punt on some young drivers again. And now we've got some really good, really interesting moves and a lot of speculation forming again right at the end of it. So it's almost been like a curve. It started off really high, then got really low, and now it's getting really high again. But don't worry, we're not going to be obsessing about Oliver Behrman. There is no British bias here. We are mainly talking about the situation which could actually benefit Red Bull with its own drivers, as well as the recent Argentinian hot property, and the fact that South America is well and truly back in Formula 1, and I am more than happy for that. I am elated! And I forgot to do it in yesterday's video, so with Bortoleto getting into F1, I must just shout out, Brazil! But my main take for this video is something that could end up being Christian Horner's grand master plan. The team could end up for 2025 with a scenario which sees Sergio Perez still at Red Bull with his current contract in place, the option for 2026 included. And I can already hear people contesting this idea, stating that instead of going through this convoluted scenario, why don't they just buy out Carlos Sainz from Williams and be done with it? That is a very good point, and many people are just screaming out for Christian Horner to do the simplest thing and get Carlos back in that seat with Max Verstappen. But we all need to remember the whole situation regarding their fathers being at odds with each other, and that was back in the junior team. And after the revelation of how much money Franco would come if he were to part with Williams, imagine the cost it would be to buy out Carlos Sainz's contract. Unfortunately, we don't know the full machinations of Sainz's contract with Williams because that's been now shrouded in secret, and even the amount of years that he's with Williams is now secluded in mystery. It's all that multi-year gubbins and whatnot. So I don't imagine James Vowles is going to be parting with Carlos unless it's maybe north of $50 million or something like that. Williams will be quids in, and Red Bull will have to be paying even more money. So yes, I don't think any situation is going to be absolutely free for Red Bull. So it's the lesser of two evils in terms of spending. Because James really wanted Carlos, and who's to say Carlos would want to go to Red Bull, where he would be at best equal with Max and at worst subservient to him. At Williams, he stands a good chance of being their team leader, or at least equal with Albon. And I think Carlos is over being the sidekick at a team, and he wants to relive his days with McLaren where he was their leader. And I can equally see that people just don't care about what happens with Checo, that they think that he's just past it and that he should be dropped immediately, and they don't really give a damn as to what happens with him, and that Red Bull should just pay the penalty and just suck it up, so that means they can have Liam Lawson next year absolutely right at the beginning in Australia. But I am just sick and tired of condemning Checo just brazenly, because honestly, as far as I'm concerned, he will be turning up in Melbourne in the RB21, and that will be that, and we'll just see how things go from there. And based on the flittering bits of information, gossip and quotations that have come about in recent days, and some of them even gathering some steam, I imagine that a potential scenario might see something that Red Bull has done in its recent history, and meaning that it could get its way before a major change in its fundamentals takes place. And the backbone of this notion comes from, well, Yuki Tsunoda. Since he's getting short shrift in regards to being a potential teammate to Verstappen in the future, and getting a post-season test in an RB20 is akin to letting blood out of a stone, I propose that he might be the core of a certain bargaining deal when it comes to Red Bull and Aston Martin, and it sees Yuki Tsunoda leave the Red Bull family altogether, and instead go over to Aston Martin in time for them becoming a works operation with Honda for 2026. Wait, hang on. Are you saying that Red Bull breaks its contract with Yuki for RB next year, and instead he just becomes some kind of pawn in a game of chess between two F1 teams? Well, yes, kind of, but like I just mentioned, this is not the first time that Red Bull and Christian Horner have done this. May I remind you of the situation back in 2017, when the relationship between Renault and Red Bull was headed toward the abyss, and the team wanted to find a new partner right at the moment when McLaren was seeking to do the same? Well, as part of a rather convoluted settlement, Carlos Sainz was shipped out of Toro Rosso to Renault, initially on loan, for the back end of 2017, and got a more permanent role the following year. But it set in motion plans for the Honda relationship to begin with Toro Rosso, and then go on to the main team the following year. Since it was becoming quite clear that Max Verstappen had settled himself in quite nicely alongside Daniel Ricciardo, who, in 2017, was not looking to be changing teams, how quickly that changed the following year. In short, Carlos was not going to be seeing any chance of getting up to the top team and replacing either driver, so maybe Horner was thinking that perhaps he might get a better chance at another team and he can forge his own destiny, which is exactly what he did. And then also, Renault got a little bit of a sweetener in a really solid driver who played a part in 2018 of having one of their best seasons in their current stint. They were fourth in the Constructors, and that was a really good lineup. And yes, of course, Carlos was replaced by Daniel Ricciardo, but Daniel Ricciardo in 2018, at the peak of his career, I don't think a single team on the grid would just look at Daniel and just go like, no thank you. Well, at least, in 2019. I would imagine that maybe Christian Horner would seek to do the same thing with Honda and give Yuki a chance at another team, as the Red Bull Ford alliance begins in 2026. And since Tsunoda's chances of getting to the top team, like Carlos back in the day, are looking remote, why not provide some kind of bargaining chip with Honda and Aston Martin, which will free up a slot at Red Bull's second team, which will be known as Racing Bulls for 2025, and it could also enable Tsunoda's F1 career to continue, having presently reached a glass ceiling. But honestly, that glass ceiling, it's not a glass ceiling, it's more like a ceiling made out of brick. But wait, come on, no, this cannot happen. Yuki cannot be denied an opportunity to prove himself once again in 2025 for Racing Bulls. Well, what do you think he's been doing ever since 2021 when he signed with AlphaTauri? That team is meant to be a place where the junior operatives or partners of Red Bull can find their feet and just show that they're worth being at the top team. And this is going to be his fifth season. Surely by now they would have made a decision. But no, we're seeing what happening with Tsunoda is exactly the same thing that happened with Gasly. That he'll become the bastion of that team. He has to lead them to glory and help them be a stable factor. Continuity, stability. That's what Christian Horner wants. But maybe it's time for Yuki to just go, you know what? I need to really forge a destiny for myself. And also, I'm not quite done yet, so hear me out. Sure, there's also the matter of Lance Stroll taking up the second seat at Aston Martin, and the odds of him being swept aside for another driver right now, they're looking remote as well. Which is something I reckon is dawning for Felipe Drugovich at present. That being said, there may come a time when Lance simply doesn't want to race anymore, and a frank conversation might be had with his father, or alternatively, Aston Martin's partners might start to push back at Papa Stroll's insistence of winning a championship with his son. However, there might be outside factors which might push Lawrence Stroll in making a decision regarding the future of the Aston Martin Formula One team, because you only have to look at what's happening with Aston Martin Lagonda, the car company within the Aston Martin brand. It's not in good financial shape at the moment, and I know that both entities are completely separate from one another, but you only have got to look at Ferrari, who really relies on Scuderia Ferrari as well as all of its other motorsport efforts in gaining plenty of advertising. Since when was the last time you saw a typical conventional Ferrari TV or online or print ad or something like that? No, Ferrari doesn't do that. It allows its race cars to do all the talking. Currently, Aston Martin Lagonda is losing $1.8 million a day and failing to meet any of its targets for 2024, be it financial or in terms of shifting its cars. Things aren't looking so hot for the automotive side, so the F1 team needs to pull its weight in not only getting better results, but more prize money and attracting new sponsors, fans, as well as new investors to aid the entire widget. Put simply, Papa Stroll wants to be the super team that is becoming evident at Ferrari at the moment when they bring in Lewis Hamilton. And what better way to do that than to get a good solid driver, which is currently what they don't have at the moment. And I know that Papa Stroll wants to realise the dream that he's had with his boy for the longest time, ever since he was a little lad, of winning the championship together in Formula One, but you only have to look at what happened in Interlagos to realise that that is really not forthcoming at the moment, at a time when Lance Stroll is about to become the most experienced F1 driver from Canada. And he still cannot get right the fact that simply, there was an escape! If financial pressure from this, as well as Stroll's business partners and perhaps even Adrian Newey himself, he now being a core partner of the F1 team, Yuki might get a chance to partner with Fernando Alonso in the near future, the Spaniard being one of Tsunoda's heroes from when he was a little lad. Well, I mean, littler lad. So, if that were to manifest itself and either Lance Stroll retires from motorsport altogether, or maybe goes over to the World Endurance division of Aston Martin, which is also picking up pace as well, and is going to be actually taking part in IMSA in the next couple of years, to not only allow Liam Lawson a full-term contract without any interruption, but also free up a seat for the likes of Franco Colapinto. Because if he is going to end up in the Red Bull family, it would be best for him to be at the second team to find his feet and see whether or not it's actually compatible, like we saw with Nick de Vries in 2023 when it ultimately was clear that it wasn't going to be compatible, instead of just lumping him in at Red Bull really too early like they did with Pierre Gasly, and he might completely flounder. It might be just too much too soon. At least at VCARB or Racing Bulls or whatever they're going to be called, it will at least be a bit more gradual, and he can just get to grips with what Red Bull is like and working with the likes of Helmut Marko. And sure, this whole exercise will cost a lot of money, but Red Bull have plenty of that in their war chest, as well as potential sponsors from Argentina who might be more than happy to help fund the compensation package that Williams might demand, because they'll be keeping Colapinto on the grid. And after all, that was what helped Franco get over the line at Williams in the first place, replacing Sargent, and it's paid off for Williams rather handsomely in all respects. So thusly, it means that Verstappen and Perez would endure at Red Bull Racing for 2025. At Racing Bulls, you'd have Colapinto and Lawson racing together for the prospect of a seat for 2026 at Red Bull Racing, should Perez no longer continue there. And then you'd also get to keep Yuki Tsunoda in Formula 1 with the Honda Works operation in time, and therefore everyone gets to be happy. I mean, except for Lance Stroll, but who knows? Maybe this might actually be a saving grace for him no longer being in the sport and he can get out of the public eye. Yes, of course, that's wishful thinking, Law, but what happens then? Surely the F2 drivers of the Red Bull Junior team are going to be looking at this and feeling that their noses have been put out of joint. A seat that could have been theirs has been taken away from them, once again, by an outsider. Yes, you have an absolute point there. There is also going to be a competition going on next year that might be a very big distraction, because it's quite evident that a showdown will take place next year in Formula 2 between both Red Bull juniors, Hadjar and Lindblad, most likely fighting for that chance in F1. And what makes it even more spicy is the fact that they're going to be driving for the same F2 outfit, that being Campos. This year, Hadjar completely eclipsed fellow junior Pepe Marti, and will now face off against Horner's youngster Arvid Lindblad, whilst Isaac is Helmut Marko's guy. So not only are those two men going to be jigging out amongst themselves on the track, it's going to get personal between Horner and Marko. Kind of like with Oscar and Lando at McLaren. Zach is Lando's champ, Andrea is Oscar's champ. When we get to 2026, if Checo hasn't cut the mustard and 2025 proves to be more of the same, Red Bull could choose not to take up the option on his contract and drop the Mexican without any penalty. That would free up a slot for either Colapinto or Lawson to be promoted, and thusly provide the victor in F2 a promotion of their own. And thusly, all will be well at Red Bull, and they can just settle down with that same lineup for the next couple of years before Max Verstappen makes a decision regarding his future at the end of 2028 when his own contract expires. So, for once, there will be harmony at Red Bull, where, provided everyone performs to the level that is expected of them, there won't be any need to axe people or replace them wholesale. Not only that, but it would give Sergio Perez one last chance to prove himself and just show the world what he is capable of, as well as ensuring his sponsors that he is being treated fairly. And hey, if it doesn't work out in 2025, that was the thing that was agreed with Sergio and his sponsors and all of his legal team, so, that is what it is, and that's all set in stone. Red Bull held up their own end of the bargain, but Checo failed to deliver in that potential scenario. As for Stroll, it's clear that something is off, and the team is probably grateful for their lack of performance being a buffer from further criticism, which is exactly what we saw last year when the team was actually near the front, and Stroll was quite some ways behind Alonso. In my humble opinion, this is all a little bit of Palmer karma from what Lance said earlier in the year when he said that he was actually doing better than Fernando. And look where we are right now. Fernando is battling with cars even though he's got excruciating back pain, and he's doing it for the mechanics. He's acting like a true leader and fighting for his team and the people he works with. Whereas with Lance, do you really see that? No, you don't. Aston Martin as a whole needs cash, and it needs its F1 team to get some more success to help bolster the car company. And right now, they're not going to be doing it with Lance Stroll on the second seat, because if we see yet another last gasp surge from one of its rivals, be it VCARB, Haas or Alpine, it might just push them off 5th place in the constructors. And surely that's not possible in 3 races, Law. They're just under 40 points ahead of any team. None of us saw what happened in Brazil with Alpine coming 33 points in one race. that could happen again if circumstances and conditions actually favour those teams and Aston Martin continue to not score points. It's possible. It's not out of the realms of possibility. It might force Aston Martin to broker a deal with Red Bull and take on Tsunoda from Red Bull and actually then maintain their relationship with Honda at its own beginning. And it might actually improve Red Bull's own optics in the eyes of F1 fans, because it's clear that Colapinto and Lawson are two big names amongst the young fan base. And if Horner can secure their long-term careers from the jaws of uncertainty, much like what they did with Checo in 2020, when they plucked him out of retirement prospects after Racing Point dropped him when they brought in Vettel, then this is exactly what Christian did, and he's going to keep on doing it to make Red Bull look good after a year which has been really damaging for the entire operation. And hey, Aston Martin gets a good driver out of it, so actually it's a win-win for everybody. And speaking of good drivers, Sauber has managed to pull off a good deal of its own by securing Gabriel Bortoleto, the current F2 champ leader, to work with their other good signing Nico Hülkenberg at the cost of Valtteri Bottas' own F1 career. But to find out why I think Binotto and Audi did the right thing by making this call regarding the young Brazilian, you can go and watch this video next, and I think you'll be very much convinced.